Go outside on a clear, dark night. Hold up your hand. Take a single grain of sand and pinch it between your fingers. Now, extend your arm all the way out, holding that tiny grain of sand against the blackness of the sky. It covers almost nothing, a microscopic fraction of the heavens. Recently, humanity pointed the most powerful machine ever built, the James Webb Space Telescope, at a patch of sky exactly that size, a tiny, dark patch that appeared completely, utterly empty. For days, the telescope simply stared into the abyss, patiently collecting ancient light. When the image finally came back to Earth, it shattered our understanding of reality. In that tiny, seemingly empty area, the size of a grain of sand held at arm's length, there were thousands of galaxies. Not stars, galaxies. Each one containing hundreds of billions of suns and countless trillions of planets. Just in that one microscopic speck. And the entire sky is full of sand. It is a scale so vast that the human brain actually struggles to process it. Modern astrophysics tells us that our observable universe is 93 billion light-years across. But here is where it gets truly terrifying and beautiful. Quantum mechanics and cosmic inflation theories are now pointing to a reality where this mind-crushing expanse we live in is just one tiny bubble. One bubble in an endless boiling ocean of other universes, the multiverse. We look at this as the ultimate triumph of modern science, the bleeding edge of human intellect in the 21st century. But I want you to travel back in time with me. 2,500 years ago, long before the invention of glass lenses, satellites, or the concept of a light year. We are in ancient India. A man is sitting quietly in the dirt under the shade of a Bodhi tree. He doesn't have a telescope. He doesn't look up at the stars. He closes his eyes and he looks inward. Yet, when he opens his eyes and speaks to his followers, he describes the exact same structure of the cosmos that the James Webb Telescope just photographed. He talks about massive clusters of solar systems grouping into larger and larger structures. He describes a universe that expands and contracts in endless violent cycles over billions of years. And then, he goes much further than our modern telescopes can currently see. He speaks of the Saen Kot Chakkrawan, a term that translates to 100 times 10 million world systems. He describes infinite dimensions. He talks about countless parallel realities, populated by different forms of consciousness, existing and vibrating in the exact same space that you and I are sitting in right now. It makes me wonder if modern astrophysics, using $10 billion infrared mirrors floating in deep space, is just now confirming what a single human mind perceived millennia ago through pure silent concentration. What exactly is the human mind? Are our brains just biological machines? Or are they quantum receivers tuned to a multiverse we're only just beginning to comprehend? I look at the hard scientific data, and I look at the ancient Pali texts, and I can't help but ask myself, where does the physical universe actually end, and where does human consciousness begin? I know we have listeners who are deeply rooted in theoretical physics and medicine, and others who've spent years exploring deep meditation. I'd be fascinated to know how you bridge that gap in your own mind. What do you think happens when the ultimate limits of science meet the ultimate depths of the mind? Because we are going to try and bridge that gap. We are going to scale the universe from a single atom out to the absolute edge of infinity. And then we are going to look even further. Before we step into the ancient world, we need to understand exactly what modern science means when it whispers the word multiverse. It is a word that gets thrown around a lot in pop culture, usually as a convenient plot device in movies. But in the quiet, sterile halls of theoretical physics, it is not a joke. It is treated with absolute, terrifying seriousness. The multiverse isn't just a wild sci-fi guess. It is a mathematical ghost that haunts our best, most proven equations. When physicists try to understand how our universe started, how it inflated from a microscopic point into everything we see in a fraction of a second, the math simply refuses to stop at one universe. The theory of cosmic inflation suggests that the Big Bang didn't just happen once. It is a process that is happening constantly. Endless explosions of space and time, creating endless expanding bubbles. We live inside one of those bubbles. Our laws of physics, our stars, our history, our concept of time, they belong only to our bubble. But outside of it, in a dark, boiling cosmic foam, there are other bubbles. Some might be completely dead, expanding into cold nothingness. Others might be governed by laws of nature we can't even dream of, operating in higher dimensions, infinite realities stretching out forever. When I think about this, I can't help but wonder if there are truly infinite universes out there, expanding forever. Does that mean every possible reality, every possible version of existence has already happened? Or is happening right now? It is a thought that really messes with your head when you stare out a window at night. Now, hold on to that image of the cosmic foam, the endless bubbles, and let's travel back across time to the words spoken under the Bodhi tree. Within the Buddhist texts, specifically woven into the ancient Pali Canon, there is a very precise phrase used to describe the scale of reality. In modern Thai, we pronounce it Saen Kot Chakkrawan. When you first hear it, it sounds like a poetic metaphor, a mythological exaggeration designed to make a religious story sound grand and majestic. But if we strip away the myth and look closely at the linguistic roots, it is not a poem at all. It is an equation. Let's break it down. The word Chakkrawan comes from the ancient Pali word Chakkavala. Chakkavala does not mean the whole universe. It specifically refers to a single world system, a sun, a moon, a planetary system orbiting in space, what modern astronomers would call a solar system. Kot is a number. In the ancient counting system, it means 10 million, and San, another number, means 100,000. If you do the math, 100,000 multiplied by 10 million, you get exactly 1 trillion. A trillion solar systems, a trillion distinct world systems, and yet the ancient texts make it explicitly clear that this massive number is merely the ancient mind's way of trying to articulate absolute infinity to people living in an agrarian society. A trillion universes, endless systems expanding and contracting, filled with different planes of existence, stretching far beyond the reach of human sight. Long before the concept of a galaxy was even a thought in the Western world, long before the telescope, the exact architecture of a multiverse was already codified, defined, and mathematically categorized in the ancient East. I have spent a long time looking into the historical context of these translations, tracing the Sanskrit and Pali roots to make sense of this parallel, but I know there are deep-dive Pali scholars, historians, and linguistics experts hiding in our audience right now. If there are deeper nuances to the word Chakkavala that I'm missing here, I would be absolutely fascinated to read your take on it. I know I don't have all the pieces to this linguistic puzzle. Because when you sit in silence with this information, when you realize that the bleeding edge of quantum mechanics and the deepest meditative states of antiquity are pointing to the exact same infinite abyss, it evokes a very specific, overwhelming feeling. If you had to choose just one single word to describe how it makes you feel, the idea of a trillion other worlds existing in the dark right now, what word would it be? For me, the word is insignificant, but in a strangely comforting, beautiful way. I'm really curious what word pops into your mind. We are about to step off the edge of this tiny blue grain of sand we call home. The journey we are taking together will push us past the farthest light captured by our satellites, right to the freezing black edge of the observable universe. But we will not stop there. When we hit the physical wall of space, we are going to dive inward, plunging into the bizarre, shifting shadows of the quantum realm, where reality fractures and splits with every breath you take. From those microscopic depths, we will open the ancient texts, the suttas, decoding the cosmos through the eyes of those who mapped it out thousands of years ago. And finally, we will arrive at the most terrifying and complex landscape of all. We will journey into the human brain, the biological machine, or perhaps the receiver, that is observing all of this. Humanity has always had a very complicated relationship with infinity. Deep down, we are deeply unsettled by things that have no end. We like walls, we like borders, we like knowing exactly where the edge of the map is. And when you look across global history, you see a violent divide in how different cultures reacted to the idea of an endless universe. In the year 1600, an Italian philosopher named Giordano Bruno stood in a public square in Rome. He looked up at the night sky and he dared to suggest a very simple, beautiful idea. He claimed the universe was infinite, without a center, and that there were countless suns with countless Earths orbiting them. For this thought, for daring to expand the borders of reality, the authorities tied him to a wooden post and burned him alive. The Western world met infinity with absolute terror and fire. But if you turn your gaze to the East, to the ancient philosophies born in the forests of India, infinity was never a heresy. It was the baseline. It was the very foundation of existence, accepted, categorized, and explored with quiet reverence. When I look at that violent contrast, a man burning in Rome for the exact same idea that was taught peacefully under a tree in India millennia earlier, I can't help but wonder, if Giordano Bruno had been born in the East, how far could his mind have gone without the threat of the fire? And it brings up something I have never quite found a clear answer to myself. Why are we so deeply terrified of a reality without borders? Between the safety of a small, closed, predictable universe and the beautiful but terrifying freedom of an infinite multiverse, I still haven't figured out which one is actually harder for the human psyche to truly accept. I'm fairly convinced that this deep-seated, dogmatic fear of infinity actually held human progress back for centuries. I honestly believe that if the ancient world as a whole had embraced this vast cosmological scale earlier, instead of punishing it, our understanding of the universe wouldn't be playing catch-up right now. But that might just be my interpretation of history. The path is set. The borders of our single, safe world are already starting to dissolve. Let's look at how this endless reality is actually built. For decades, we were handed a very neat, very clean origin story for everything. We called it the Big Bang. You know the story. There was a single point of infinite density. It exploded, and over billions of years it cooled down to form stars, planets, and eventually us. It was a comfortable story, a single beginning leading to a single universe. But in 1980, a theoretical physicist named Alan Guth realized something quietly terrifying. The math did not add up. When looking at the cosmic microwave background radiation, the ancient light left over from the dawn of time, Guth saw that the universe was too smooth, too evenly distributed. The standard Big Bang model could not explain this. So, he proposed a theory called cosmic inflation. Guth suggested that in the very first fraction of a second after the Big Bang, the universe did not just expand, it inflated violently, exponentially, faster than the speed of light itself. Space stretched out infinitely in a microscopic fraction of a second. And here is the detail that shatters our neat single universe story. The math of cosmic inflation dictates that this process does not just start and stop once. It is eternal. It is happening right now. Think of a massive, dark ocean of boiling water. As the water furiously boils, bubbles constantly form, expand, and rise. According to the theory of eternal inflation, the very fabric of space is that boiling water. It is expanding forever at terrifying speeds. And within this violently expanding space, little pockets of energy suddenly cool down and stabilize. When they cool, they stop inflating, and they form a bubble. Everything we have ever known, all the billions of galaxies, the supermassive black holes, the ancient starlight, the Earth, the exact spot you're sitting right now, we are entirely contained inside just one of those bubbles. Our entire observable universe, 93 billion light-years across, is nothing more than the interior wall of a single isolated bubble. And outside our bubble, the boiling water continues. Infinite space, expanding forever, constantly creating infinite other universes. New universes being born every single millisecond. Some of those bubbles might be completely dark, governed by physics that do not allow for the creation of light. Some might have gravity so strong that they crush themselves into dust the moment they are born. And out of infinity, mathematical probability dictates that some of those bubbles must be eerily similar to ours. I'm laying out the core visual concept of Alan Guth's inflation here, but I know this touches on some incredibly dense quantum field theory involving false vacuums and scalar fields. I'm laying this out based on the widely accepted models, but I'm absolutely certain there are people listening right now who study astrophysics or cosmology on a much deeper academic level. If there are fascinating nuances to eternal inflation that I'm missing here, I would love for you to share them. It's always incredible to see how much deeper the collective knowledge of this audience goes. Because when I try to truly visualize this eternal ocean of bubble universes constantly being created, I always hit a mental wall. It makes me wonder, if the boiling water never stops expanding, does that mean the creation of life and consciousness is also just an infinite mechanical repetition? It's a riddle with no clear answer, and I find myself constantly torn between feeling utterly insignificant and feeling like an essential piece of an infinite puzzle. If you had to pick just one word to describe the feeling of being inside a single cosmic bubble, floating blindly in an infinite ocean of other universes, what word would you use? For me, the word is vertigo, just a dizzying sense of scale. I'm really curious what word pops into your mind when you visualize that. We're sealed inside our bubble. It feels completely solid, completely real, but the physical rules inside our bubble are not as rigid as they seem. Because to understand how parallel dimensions exist, we have to stop looking at the immense vastness of deep space, and we have to start looking closely at the shadows of the atomic world. To truly understand the architecture of the multiverse, we have to look away from the massive scale of deep space and shrink down, way down. Past the cells in your body, past the molecules, right down to the subatomic shadows, the quantum realm. Back in the 1920s, physicists conducted something called the double-slit experiment. They fired individual subatomic particles, like electrons, at a barrier with two tiny slits. They expected them to act like little bullets, hitting the wall behind the slits in two neat lines. Instead, the particles acted like a wave of water, passing through both slits at the exact same time and creating a complex interference pattern on the wall. But here is where reality broke. When the scientists placed a detector to observe exactly which slit the particle was going through, the particle stopped acting like a wave. It went straight back to acting like a tiny bullet. The universe literally changed its physical behavior simply because it was being watched. Reality, at its core, is not solid until you look at it. I'm outlining the classic double-slit experiment here, but I know quantum mechanics goes so much deeper into complex mathematics like wave function collapse and the Schrödinger equation. I'm sure there are physicists or engineers listening right now who understand the terrifying math behind this far better than I do. If I'm oversimplifying the Copenhagen interpretation here, I would love for you to drop some deeper knowledge in the comments. It's always fascinating to see how the true experts in our audience break this down. For decades, the standard scientific answer to this mystery was that observing a particle forces it to make a choice. It forces reality to crystallize into one single outcome. But in 1957, a brilliant young physicist named Hugh Everett III looked at the math and realized something far disturbing. He proposed that the particle doesn't choose, it does both. And to accommodate both outcomes, reality itself splits. This became known as the many worlds interpretation. Think about a moment in your life where everything hung by a fragile thread. I remember once driving late at night and I narrowly avoided a massive high-speed collision by a matter of inches. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding, haunted by the thought of what would have happened if I had turned the wheel a fraction of a second later. It's an incredibly chilling sensation. I don't know if anyone else has ever had a moment like that, where you can almost physically feel the ghost of the tragedy that didn't happen. Hugh Everett's mathematics suggest that in that exact fraction of a second, reality fractured. There's a universe where I swerved in time and one where I didn't. Every single quantum event, every tiny subatomic variation creates a brand new branching universe. Millions of times a second, reality is dividing. Now, a lot of old-school physicists absolutely hate this idea, but if I'm going to be completely honest, I think the many worlds interpretation makes infinitely more mathematical sense than the traditional idea that reality just randomly collapses into a single state. The math for many worlds is clean, it's pure. I'm fairly confident that Everett was right, and that refusing to accept it is just human ego wanting to believe our timeline is special. But, of course, that might just be my own bias speaking. But here's the detail that keeps me awake at night. Where do these other universes go? They're not billions of light years away in deep space. They're right here. They exist in the exact same physical space that you are occupying right this very second. Your physical body and your consciousness are tuned to this specific frequency of reality, but the other stations, the other universes, are still broadcasting right on top of you. When you really sit quietly with this concept, I can't help but wonder if every possible choice creates a new reality and infinite versions of you are walking around right now, vibrating just out of phase. What is one single word that describes how that makes you feel? For me, the word is claustrophobic. I really want to know what word you would use to describe that feeling. So, if reality is constantly splitting and countless parallel dimensions are stacked right on top of us, how is the universe actually holding all of this architecture together without collapsing in on itself? To answer that, we have to leave the three-dimensional world behind entirely. We have to look at the invisible threads holding the multiverse together. We have to look at string theory and the terrifying concept of higher dimensions. If there are infinite realities, branching out every fraction of a second and vibrating right on top of us, a very obvious physical problem arises. Where do they all fit? Our three-dimensional world, up, down, left, right, forward, backward, is simply too small to contain infinite overlapping universes. The math completely breaks down. To make it work, the universe needs a bigger stage. It needs room to hide all of this architecture. This is where theoretical physics stops looking like science and starts looking like pure mysticism. To solve this, physicists developed string theory. The core idea is that if you zoom in past the protons and neutrons, the fundamental ingredients of reality are not tiny solid dots. They are microscopic vibrating loops of energy, strings. Just like the strings on a violin, the way they vibrate determines what kind of particle they become. A certain vibration makes a photon of light. Another vibration makes a piece of gravity. But when scientists ran the equations for these vibrating strings, the math collapsed. It didn't work in 3 dimensions. It didn't work in 4 or 5 or 6. The mathematics of string theory, specifically M theory, only functions perfectly if the universe has exactly 11 dimensions. Imagine a loaf of bread sliced. Now imagine you are a microscopic insect born on one single slice somewhere in the middle of that loaf. Your entire world, everything you can see, touch, and understand is just that one two-dimensional slice. You have no concept of the slice next to you. In M theory, our entire magnificent universe, with all of its billions of galaxies, is just one single slice. They call it a brain, short for membrane. We're trapped on a three-dimensional brain floating in a massively larger 11-dimensional space called the bulk. And in that bulk, there are other brains, other universes, floating right next to ours, so close they might be fractions of a millimeter away from you right now, but existing in a dimension you physically cannot perceive. Some physicists even theorize that the Big Bang itself was not an explosion from a single point, but the terrifying result of two colossal brains floating in the bulk, drifting too close and smashing into each other. I am visualizing this as a massive cosmic loaf of bread, but I know the mathematics of M theory, specifically things like Calabi-Yau manifolds, are notoriously some of the most punishing, incomprehensible equations in modern physics. I am translating this into simple 3D concepts, but I am absolutely certain we have physicists listening right now who study higher dimensional geometry. If you can explain an 11-dimensional space better than a sliced loaf of bread, please drop it in the comments. I read them all, and I truly rely on the deep experts hidden in this audience to fill in the gaps that my own mind just cannot visualize. Because when you put all of these theories together, the picture it paints is staggering. Max Tegmark, a brilliant cosmologist at MIT, wrote a legendary paper categorizing this madness into what he calls the 4 levels of the multiverse. Level 1 is just our universe, but stretching on infinitely far past our cosmic horizon. If you travel far enough, math dictates you will eventually hit an exact duplicate of yourself. Level 2 is the eternal inflation model, the infinite boiling ocean of bubbles, where different bubbles have entirely different laws of physics. Level 3 is the quantum many worlds, the reality where every choice, every split second fractures the universe into endless parallel timelines happening right here, right now. And level 4 is the absolute most terrifying, the ultimate mathematical universe. It dictates that if a mathematical structure can exist in theory, it absolutely must exist in physical reality somewhere. If I'm going to be completely honest here, and if I have to plant my flag on this issue, I think sticking to the idea of a single, isolated universe is almost a form of intellectual comfort food. Looking at the sheer weight of quantum mechanics and cosmology, I strongly believe the single universe model is dead. Science has officially abandoned it. The math of reality demands infinity, and pretending otherwise is just human ego. We desperately want to believe our timeline, our world is the center of the stage. I do not see how anyone can look at M theory and still fundamentally believe we are in just one isolated bubble. But that's just my conclusion, and I'm very aware it might just be my mind trying to make peace with the math. What we have established here is that modern Western science, armed with supercomputers, orbital telescopes, and centuries of mathematical evolution, has finally reached a consensus. Infinity is not an option. It is a mathematical necessity. We are a microscopic fraction of a speck of dust in an endlessly repeating multidimensional multiverse. We view this as the ultimate peak of modern discovery. But what if I told you that we didn't need particle accelerators to map this out? What if I told you that the precise architecture of this expanding, contracting, multidimensional infinity was completely documented, spoken out loud, and memorized by monks in the forests of India millennia before the word quantum was ever spoken? Let's leave the mathematics behind. We're stepping into the ancient world. Picture a dense, quiet forest in ancient India. There is no light pollution, just a blazing, terrifyingly clear canopy of stars overhead. A monk named Ananda, the closest attendant to the Buddha, is sitting with him. Ananda is a deep thinker. He is curious, and on this particular night, he asks a question that cosmologists are still struggling with today. He asks about the sheer scale of the universe. This conversation is preserved in an ancient text called the Ananda Sutta, specifically Anguttara Nikaya 3.80. And what happens next is not a mystical poem about gods and spirits. It is a chillingly precise mathematical progression. The Buddha does not answer with metaphors. He starts by defining a single, measurable baseline. He describes a space illuminated by one sun and one moon where beings live and exist, a single solar system. The Pali word for this is Chakkavala. Then he scales up. He tells Ananda to imagine 1,000 of these solar systems, these suns and moons, grouped together in space. He calls this a Sahasra Loka Dhatu, a 1,000-fold minor world system. If you look at modern astronomy, this is roughly the equivalent of a local stellar neighborhood. But he doesn't stop there. He tells Ananda to take that entire 1,000-fold system and multiply it by 1,000, 1,000,000 solar systems, grouped together, a Dvi Sahasra. In modern astrophysical terms, we call this a galactic cluster. And then he takes that massive cluster and multiplies it by 1,000 again, a billion-fold world system, the Tri Sahasra Maha Sahasra, a cosmic structure so unbelievably massive it contains 1 billion suns, 1 billion worlds grouped and clustered together in the dark abyss of space. For thousands of years, people read that text and thought it was just religious exaggeration, a beautiful myth meant to make the cosmos sound grand. It wasn't until the late 20th century, when we finally built telescopes powerful enough to map the deep universe, that we realized the truth. We found out that the universe isn't just a random even soup of stars. It is mathematically clustered exactly the way the Buddha described. We now know that our Milky Way galaxy is just one tiny speck within a massive grouping of galaxies. We call it the Laniakea supercluster. Laniakea is a Hawaiian word meaning immense heaven. It contains over 100,000 galaxies strung together like glowing veins in the dark. I look at this ancient sutta, mapped out mathematically over 2.5 millennia ago, and then I look at the digital 3D map of the Laniakea supercluster generated by modern supercomputers, and the structural hierarchy is exactly the same. A base system grouped by 1,000, grouped by 1,000, grouped by 1,000. I am exploring this from the perspective of someone fascinated by the history of human thought, but I know for a fact that there are professional astronomers and deep-dive Pali scholars hiding quietly in our audience right now. I have laid out the basic translation and the correlation here, but I know I do not possess all the pieces to this puzzle. I would absolutely love to know how someone who studies the cosmos for a living or someone who dissects ancient Sanskrit daily views this parallel. If there is a deeper layer of astrophysics or ancient linguistics that I am missing here, I want you to tell me. Because looking at this, it is incredibly hard not to feel like a profound truth about reality was being translated across time. And honestly, when I sit with this information, I cannot help but wonder. If a human mind sitting in complete silence under a tree could accurately map the geometric structure of a galactic supercluster without ever looking through a glass lens, what exactly is the human brain capable of seeing that we haven't figured out yet? Is consciousness actually confined to the physical skull, or is it somehow woven into the very fabric of those billion-fold universes? If space is an infinite, multidimensional ocean of bubble universes, then what about time? If the stage is endless, is the play itself also eternal? In the modern Western world, we are conditioned to think of time as a straight arrow. It is a linear journey. You are born, you grow old, you die. History has a starting point, and it has an end. And for a long time, modern cosmology agreed with this linear bias. It told us the universe had a definitive beginning, the Big Bang, and that it will eventually have a cold, dark final end, a heat death where all energy is spent and the universe becomes a silent, frozen void forever, a straight line. But in recent years, this linear model has begun to show massive, undeniable cracks. Theoretical physicists are running into a brick wall. What happened before the Big Bang? What triggered the singularity? To solve this, one of the greatest mathematical minds of our time, Nobel laureate Sir Roger Penrose, proposed a mind-bending theory called conformal cyclic cosmology. Penrose suggests that when our universe expands to its absolute limit, trillions of years in the future, when all stars have burned out, all black holes have evaporated, and all matter has decayed into pure radiation, something extraordinary happens. In a universe filled only with massless particles of light, the concepts of physical scale, distance, and even time completely lose their meaning. To a photon which does not experience time or space, a universe that is infinitely vast is mathematically identical to a universe that is infinitely small. At that precise mathematical inflection point, the universe essentially forgets how big it is. The extreme cold emptiness of the far future becomes mathematically indistinguishable from the hot, dense singularity of a new Big Bang. The end of one universe seamlessly resets, triggering the beginning of the next. Penrose calls these cosmic epochs eons. We are not living in the only universe. We are living in just one eon, in an endless cyclic chain of universes, stretching infinitely into the past and infinitely into the future. Now let's open the ancient pages of the Digha Nikaya, chapter 27, the Aganya Sutta. In this discourse, the Buddha is describing the cosmic history of our world system, and he does not use the language of linear creation. Instead, he speaks of two powerful cyclic forces. He speaks of the samvatta mana kappa. The word samvatta means to contract, to wind down, to dissolve. It is the massive cosmic period where the universe collapses in on itself, what modern physics would call a big crunch. And then he speaks of the vivatta mana kappa. The word vivatta means to expand, to unfold, to evolve. It is the epoch where the universe re-emerges, expanding outward once again, what we call the Big Bang and cosmic expansion. To the Buddha, these two forces are not one-time anomalies. They are a breathing lung. The cosmos inhales and it contracts into dissolution. It exhales and it expands into creation. Time is not a straight line. It is a wheel. I'm going to be totally blunt here, and this is where I want to plant my flag. I am convinced that the scientific community's long-standing obsession with finding a single absolute beginning of time, a literal day one of creation, is not a purely objective scientific pursuit. I think it is a deep-seated cultural hangover from Western religious dogmas of Genesis and Judgment Day. The equations have been pointing to a cyclic universe for a long time, but we resisted it because our cultural minds are terrified of a time that never starts and never ends. I'm fairly confident that Penrose is on the right path and that cyclic cosmology is the only logical reality. But I'm sure some of you might disagree and hold on to the classic Big Bang to heat-death timeline. But if this is true, if Penrose's mathematics and the Buddha's suttas are correct, it leaves us with an incredibly heavy question. If time is infinitely looped, if the universe collapses and expands in eternal repetition, does that mean every action, every suffering, and every choice we make is destined to repeat itself exactly as it is right now, forever? Are we trapped in an endless replay of our own lives, or is there room for genuine change in each new cycle? I honestly do not know how to answer that. It's a paradox that can make you feel entirely powerless or incredibly free. We have mapped a universe that is infinite in space and infinite in time, an endless breathing ocean of bubble worlds. But if the cosmos is a cycle of infinite scale, then where do we go? What happens when a mind tries to leave this physical cycle entirely? To understand that, we have to look at a journey that goes far beyond the physical laws of our world. We have to look at the edge of the mind itself. If the universe is an endless loop of expansion and contraction, a massive, breathing web of dimensions, it raises a very human question. Can we escape it? If we had a vessel fast enough or a technology advanced enough, could we physically fly to the absolute edge of this cosmic matrix, break through the wall, and leave the cycle behind? To answer this, the ancient texts do not point to a machine. They point to a monk. In the inner circle of the Buddha, there was a monk named Mahamoggallana. He was renowned above all others for possessing the highest iddhi, the supreme psychic and spiritual powers. In the descriptions of his abilities, he did not just meditate, he could master the material world. He could alter his physical form, walk through solid walls, step across parallel dimensions, and travel across space in the fraction of a second it takes a strong man to bend his arm. He was the ultimate cosmic traveler. One day, Moggallana decided to test the physical boundaries of the cosmos. He wanted to find the ultimate outer limit of the Buddha's presence, the absolute physical edge of the Chakkrawan, the boundless world systems. Using his mind-made body, Moggallana projected himself outward, launching into the dark abyss of deep space. He traveled westerly, passing solar system after solar system, crossing massive galactic clusters, leaving entire galaxies behind like specks of dust in his wake. He was moving at speeds that would make the speed of light look like a crawl. He traveled through the empty void, crossing unimaginable distances, pushing deeper into the unknown than any human instrument will ever go. Eventually, he arrived at a world system so incredibly distant, in a galaxy so far removed from ours, that the physical scale of reality itself had shifted. Moggallana landed on this alien world. The planet was inhabited by conscious beings, but they were massive, towering giants, 80 times larger than humans on Earth. To these colossal beings, Moggallana was nothing more than a microscopic speck. Exhausted from his cosmic journey, Moggallana landed on the rim of an alms bowl belonging to one of the giant monks of that distant world. The giants looked down at this tiny miniature traveler sitting on the edge of the wooden bowl. They laughed, treating him like a strange, exotic insect that had drifted in from the wild. But the Buddha of that distant world stopped them. He looked down at Moggallana with deep reverence and said, "Do not mock him. This is a great enlightened disciple from a world system far, far away." Then, Gautama Buddha's voice resonated across the vast dimensions of space, reaching Moggallana on that giant planet. The Buddha looked at his exhausted disciple and gave him a chilling warning. He explained, "Moggallana, if you were to use your spiritual powers to fly through space for eons, crossing distances as countless as the grains of sand in the Ganges River, you would still never ever reach the end of the world systems. The physical cosmos is an infinite repeating hall of mirrors." Then the Buddha delivered the ultimate lesson of cyclic cosmology. He said, "I tell you, Moggallana, you cannot escape suffering and you cannot reach the end of the world by traveling through physical space. The only way to reach the end of the world, to truly transcend the cycle of death and rebirth, is by turning your awareness completely inward. Because the entire universe, its creation, its boundless expansion, its cold contraction, and the path to its absolute cessation is not out there in the stars. It is projected right here, inside this very fathom-long body with its perceptions and its mind." I think about this story a lot when I look at our modern world. I remember when I was younger, I used to struggle with deep internal restlessness. I would tell myself that if I could just pack my bags, move to a different city, or fly to a different country, all of my problems and anxieties would disappear. It's a very common human instinct. I'm sure many of you have had that exact moment in your lives, that overwhelming urge to run away to the other side of the world, only to find that the moment you land, your mind has carried the exact same chaos right along with you. When we look at our species today, we're spending billions of dollars trying to build rockets to colonize Mars, trying to find a way to escape our dying planet. And while space exploration is a beautiful testament to human curiosity, I can't help but ask myself a very difficult question. If we cannot escape our own suffering by moving to a different continent, what makes us think we'll escape it by moving to a different planet? Is our obsession with space travel just a massive multi-billion-dollar distraction from the far more difficult, far more terrifying journey of looking inside ourselves? I honestly don't know if humanity will ever find peace in the stars if we cannot find it on the ground. I'm sharing this ancient story of Moggallana's interstellar flight as it is recorded in the classical scriptures, but I know for a fact that we have deep practitioners of meditation, people who have explored astral projection, and those who have spent decades studying the esoteric layers of the Pali texts listening to us right now. If you have encountered other accounts of these dimensions or have a different interpretation of Moggallana's journey, I would be incredibly grateful if you shared your insights. I always look forward to learning from the deep collective wisdom of this community. Moggallana realized that the physical universe is a beautiful illusion, an endless playground of space and time. But if the physical stars are a dead end, then how do we actually travel inward? To understand that, we have to look at the intersection where modern quantum physics meets the ultimate nature of the human mind. We have to look at the observer. Moggallana returned from his impossible cosmic journey with a realization that still echoes through time. You cannot reach the end of the universe by traveling through physical space. The boundary is not out there, it is within. But why? Why would a physical universe with all its colossal stars and infinite galaxies be dependent on the internal space of the mind? To understand this, we have to look at the cornerstone of modern quantum mechanics, the observer effect. If you take a subatomic particle, like an electron, and you leave it completely alone in the dark, it does not exist as a solid, localized object. It is a wave of probability. It exists in a state of suspended potential, spread out across space, occupying multiple possible positions at the exact same time. It is a ghost. It is only when an observer, a conscious mind, or a detecting instrument aligned with a conscious mind looks at it that the wave function collapses. The ghost vanishes. The probability instantly crystallizes into a solid physical particle. The act of observation literally creates the physical reality. For generations, Western science operated under the banner of materialism. It is the belief that matter is the fundamental reality of the universe, and that consciousness is just a minor byproduct, a lucky chemical accident that happened inside our brains. But quantum physics completely turned this on its head. It suggests that without an observer, there is no physical world. Matter depends on the mind to exist. Now, compare this quantum reality to the very first line of the Dhammapada, one of the most sacred collections of the Buddhist teachings. Mano pubangama dhamma mano seta mano maya. Translated, it means, mind precedes all things. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. For 2,500 years, Eastern philosophy has maintained that the physical world is Maya, a projection, a dream, a shadow on the wall. The mind is not a passenger inside a physical universe. The mind is the builder of the universe. And today, the most advanced laboratories on Earth are whispering the exact same truth. The universe is not a collection of physical rocks floating in a cold void. It is a participatory playground of consciousness. I am going to make a statement that might deeply offend some of our materialist friends, but I want to put it out there. I am convinced that the entire concept of materialism, the idea that the physical brain generates consciousness, is a complete and utter dead end. I think we have it completely backwards. The brain does not generate the mind. The mind is the fundamental field of reality, and the physical brain is just a biological antenna designed to tune in to a fraction of it. I am highly confident that science will eventually have to officially abandon the idea that matter came first. Of course, that is a highly provocative claim, and I'm ready for the materialists to try and tear this down. But looking at the quantum data, I do not see any logical path. But if we accept this, If the mind is the fundamental reality and the physical world is just a projection, it lands us right in the middle of a staggering cosmic riddle. If every quantum event, every tiny decision fractures the physical universe into infinite parallel realities, where is your mind actually located? When reality splits, does your soul, your consciousness, also split into millions of pieces? Or is your mind actually a single infinite eye observing a trillion worlds at the same time? I have spent years reading both quantum physics and Buddhist philosophy, and I still cannot find a clear, logical answer. Between our consciousness splitting infinitely and our consciousness being a single massive eye observing a trillion worlds at once, I honestly do not know which model is more mind-bending. If our minds are antennas tuning into this vast multidimensional reality, then what happens when we deliberately change the frequency? What happens when we quiet the brain and allow the consciousness to expand past the physical body? To understand that, we have to look at what happens to the human brain during the deepest states of meditation. We have to look at the biology of infinity. If our minds are antennas designed to tune into reality, then what happens when we deliberately alter the physical biology of that antenna? What happens when we change the frequency to tune in to infinity? To understand how the ancient mind mapped the multiverse, we have to look at one of the most exciting areas in modern neuroscience, the default mode network. Often called the DMN, this is a collection of highly active, highly interconnected brain regions that acts as the physical home of your ego. It is the part of your brain that is active when you are daydreaming, worrying about the future, or obsessing over your past. It keeps you trapped in the narrow story of you. Deep inside the parietal lobe of your brain, there's a specific group of neurons responsible for spatial processing. Its job is to constantly calculate boundaries. It tells you exactly where your physical body ends and where the outside world begins. It is the biological wall of your individuality. But neuroimaging studies on advanced meditators show something incredible. When a practitioner enters a state of deep concentration known as samadhi, the default mode network completely downregulates. It goes dark. At the same time, the sensory inputs to the parietal lobe are blocked. Because this brain region is starved of information, it can no longer calculate boundaries. It loses the ability to distinguish between the self and the non-self. The physical boundary of the ego completely dissolves. I remember the first time I experienced a small glimpse of this. I was practicing a deep breathwork and meditation session in a completely dark, quiet room. After about 40 minutes of intense single-pointed focus, the physical sensation of my hands, my chest, and the floor beneath me simply vanished. I felt like a floating point of pure awareness, suspended in an endless empty ocean. It was terrifying at first, but then it became profoundly peaceful. I'm really curious if anyone else listening to this has ever experienced a similar moment, whether through deep meditation, sensory deprivation tanks, or even just that strange, fleeting second right before you fall asleep, where your body suddenly feels like it has no weight and no boundaries. It makes you realize how fragile our daily perception of being a solid body really is. What neuroscience is just now mapping with fMRI machines is a journey that was meticulously documented 2,500 years ago. The Buddha described 4 advanced formless states of consciousness known as the arupa jhanas. These are meditations designed to transcend the physical form entirely. The first state is akasa nanshayatana, the dimension of infinite space. When a meditator reaches this level of concentration, all perceptions of physical objects and physical boundaries fall away, leaving only an awareness of endless, boundless space. Immediately after this, the mind transitions to vijnana nanshayatana, the dimension of infinite consciousness. The meditator realizes that to perceive infinite space, the mind itself must be infinite. The observer and the observed merge into one. So here is the ultimate question that modern science cannot answer. When these advanced meditators down-regulate their brains, when their parietal lobes shut down and they experience infinite space and infinite consciousness, is this just a chemical trick? Is it just a biological malfunction of a sensory-deprived brain? Or is the human brain actually a highly restrictive filter? And by quieting the ego, are we removing that filter? Are these meditators actually tapping into the higher dimensions of the multiverse that M-theory is trying to calculate with supercomputers? I'm explaining this from a conceptual neuroscience meets philosophy angle, but I'm fully aware that there are neuroscientists, medical doctors, and highly advanced meditators in our audience. I would love to hear how those of you in the medical field, or those who have deeply practiced these jhanas, view this intersection. Is the brain creating infinity, or is it finally letting infinity in? I really rely on your collective wisdom to help us bridge this massive gap. If we are indeed removing a biological filter, if our minds can expand to perceive the infinite cyclical nature of the multiverse, then where does that leave us? Why are we here in this specific bubble, living this specific life? To find our place in this infinity, we have to look at the ultimate conclusion of this cosmic journey. We have to look at what happens when the mind goes beyond the multiverse entirely. If we can indeed train the human brain to dissolve its biological filters and perceive infinite space, then what actually happens when those filters are gone? What or who is occupying that vast, unseen territory? In classical Buddhist cosmology, the universe is mapped into 31 distinct planes of existence. This is often dismissed by modern critics as mere religious folklore, a collection of ancient heavens and hells populated by gods and demons. But if you look past the mythological language, the structure is incredibly sophisticated. The Buddha divides these 31 planes into 3 distinct tiers. First is the Kamaloka, the sensuous realm, which is the physical, dense world we inhabit alongside animals and other physical organisms. Then comes the Rupa Loka, the fine material realm. It is populated by beings called Brahmas, who do not possess gross physical bodies of flesh and bone, but highly refined, subtle bodies of light and energy. And finally, at the very top is the Arupa Loka, the formless realm. This is inhabited by beings of pure mind, completely devoid of any physical or spatial form whatsoever. These beings, the Devas and the Brahmas, are not magical, omnipotent gods in the Western sense. In Buddhism, they are simply other sentient species. They are born, they live, they learn, they make mistakes, and they eventually die. They are, for all practical purposes, higher dimensional extraterrestrials. I am going to throw down a very clear, perhaps controversial flag here. I firmly believe that humanity's current search for extraterrestrial life is incredibly primitive. We are spending billions of dollars looking for organic, carbon-based organisms crawling in the mud on Mars or listening for radio signals from distant stars. We are assuming that intelligent aliens must look like us, breathe like us, and live in our narrow three-dimensional space. I think this is a massive, ego-driven mistake. The most advanced civilizations in the multiverse aren't traveling through deep space in metallic tin cans. They are already here, existing right beside us, vibrating in parallel dimensions that our physical eyes simply cannot register. I am quite confident that our traditional definition of an alien is completely obsolete. I know some of you might still hold out hope for finding organic life on other planets, but looking at the dimensional scale of the multiverse, I just don't think that is where the real answers are. But how can an entire ecology of higher dimensional beings exist all around us and remain completely invisible to our scientific instruments? To answer that, we have to look at the most humbling realization in modern astrophysics.
If you add up all the matter we can physically see in the cosmos, every burning star, every planet, every dust cloud, black hole, and galaxy captured by our most powerful orbital telescopes, it accounts for only 5% of the universe. Only 5%. The other 95% of our universe is made of two mysterious, completely invisible forces that we cannot directly detect. We call them dark matter and dark energy. They do not reflect, absorb, or emit light. They pass right through our solid Earth, right through our concrete walls, right through our physical bodies, completely undetected. Yet they are the gravity holding our galaxies together and the energy driving the expansion of our space. 95% of our universe is literally a hidden, invisible scaffolding. And it makes me wonder, if 95% of reality is completely invisible to our physical senses, is it possible that this dark sector is the actual landscape where the other 31 planes of existence reside? Are we the ones who are blind, locked inside a tiny 5% bubble of dense matter, while higher dimensional beings are looking right through us? It's a chilling open loop. If a diva or a Brahma is made of this non-interactive dark matter energy, they could be standing in the room with you right now and you would never know. If we are surrounded by a hidden multidimensional reality and our physical world is just a microscopic fraction of a massive cosmic cycle, it forces us to ask the ultimate question: where do we fit in? Why do our actions, our moral choices, and our suffering matter in a universe of such terrifying proportions?
We have traveled across the vast, freezing ocean of the cosmic bubbles, peered into the bizarre shadows of the quantum split, and looked at the biological boundaries of the human brain. When you place these two worlds side by side, the bleeding edge of modern theoretical physics and the ancient, quiet wisdom of Buddhist cosmology, the mind naturally begins to spin. Three massive, heavy questions always rise to the surface of this conversation. Let's face them, one by one. The first question is a deeply personal existential paradox. If the multiverse is real, and there are infinite branching versions of me living out every possible choice, does my karma even matter here? If I commit a terrible deed in this timeline, but another version of me does something incredibly noble in a parallel universe, doesn't the cosmic scale just balance itself out? To answer this, we have to look at the core of the Buddha's most revolutionary teaching, anatta, the illusion of the self. The mistake we make when visualizing the multiverse is assuming there is a solid, singular you that is traveling across these different timelines. We imagine our soul as a physical passenger, but Buddhism teaches that there is no permanent, unchanging self. You are not a solid vessel. You are a stream of consciousness. Think of a river. If the water in one branch of the river becomes heavily polluted, it doesn't matter that the water in a different branch of the river, miles away in another valley, is running crystal clean. The water in this valley, right here, is the water you have to live in. Your karmic responsibility is locked on to the exact, specific stream of consciousness you are experiencing in this precise slice of the multiverse right now. You cannot escape the consequences of your actions by pointing to a parallel version of yourself who got it right. But it still leaves me with a quiet riddle that I don't have a clear answer to. If all these parallel versions of us share a single quantum origin point, is it possible that a massive spiritual breakthrough or a profound moment of suffering in one timeline can send subtle quantum ripples through the fabric of the multiverse, whispering into the subconscious of our other selves? I honestly don't know. It makes me wonder if those sudden, unexplainable shifts in our intuition are actually the echoes of choices we made in another life, in another bubble. This brings us to the second question. Is it a waste of time to even think about this? Didn't the Buddha explicitly warn us that cosmology is an unanswerable question? He did. In the ancient texts, the Buddha listed the origin and the absolute boundaries of the physical universe as one of the four achinteya, the unconjecturable things. He warned that a person spent their life obsessing over lokacinta, trying to calculate the physical edge of the cosmos with their logical mind. They would run themselves into absolute madness before finding the answer. Because, as we established, the physical universe is an infinite cyclic loop. But there is a crucial difference between obsessing over physical measurements and understanding the sheer mind-bending scale of reality. The Buddha did not want us to ignore the vastness. He used the Saen Kot Chakkrawan, the trillion world systems, as a clinical tool to destroy the human ego. When you truly look at the scale of the multiverse, when you realize that our entire Earth is just a microscopic speck of dust in an endless breathing ocean of worlds, your personal pride, your petty daily anxieties, and your self-importance instantly vaporize. You realize anicca, the absolute impermanence of all things. You stop clutching so tightly to your tiny story. You realize that trying to control this infinite cosmic ocean is foolish, and you finally learn to let go. Which leads us to the final, haunting question that humanity has asked since we first looked up at the night sky. Are we alone in this dark expanse? If we look at modern mathematics, specifically the Drake equation, which calculates the probability of active communicative civilizations in our galaxy, the mathematical chance of us being the only living, conscious life in existence is virtually zero. It is a statistical impossibility. And if you open the ancient suttas, the answer is even more direct. The Buddha routinely speaks of other chakrawalas, other solar systems populated with sentient beings with entirely different physical structures, breathing different atmospheres, living out their own unique karmic journeys. I am going to take a very firm, uncompromising stance. I think anyone who still believes we are the only living, conscious beings in this colossal, multidimensional architecture is suffering from a deep, almost childish delusion. The universe is absolutely teeming with life, both physical and dimensional. Believing we are alone is just a desperate attempt to feel special in a cosmos that doesn't care about our vanity. I am quite certain of this, even though I know some traditionalists might find comfort in our isolation. But if we are not alone, and if we are just a tiny thread in a massive, infinite tapestry of minds, then what is the ultimate point of all of this? How do we find our home? To understand that, we have to look at the final, quiet truth that lies beyond the multiverse. We have to look at what happens when the journey ends. If the cosmos is a cyclic, infinite maze of 31 dimensions, and we are surrounded by an invisible 95% scaffolding of dark matter, then how do we find our way home? To answer this, we must look to a conversation that took place in the quiet of the night between the Buddha and a celestial being named Rohitasa. This encounter is recorded in the Rohitasa Sutta. In a previous human life, Rohitasa was not an ordinary man. He was a skywalker, a highly advanced spiritual seeker who possessed miraculous speed. It was said that he could step from the Eastern Ocean to the Western Ocean in a single stride. Haunted by the suffering of existence, Rohitasa decided to use his incredible speed to escape it. He vowed to run until he reached the physical end of the world. He ran at this unimaginable speed for 100 years, never stopping except for his most basic physical needs. He traveled across vast, endless landscapes, pushing further than any human had ever gone. And yet, after a century of continuous running, Rohitasa died on the journey, completely failing to reach the boundary of the world. Now, reborn as a celestial being, he stands before the Buddha in the middle of the night, and he asks the exact same question. Is it possible, Lord, by traveling, to know, to see, or to reach the physical end of the world, where one is no longer subject to birth, aging, death, and rebirth. The Buddha looks at him and says, "No, you cannot reach the end of the world by traveling." And then he delivers the words that completely turn our understanding of space, time, and the entire multiverse inside out. The Buddha says, "Yet, friend, I also say that without reaching the end of the world, there is no making an end to suffering. It is, friend, in this fathom-long body, endowed with perception and mind, that I declare the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path leading to the cessation of the world." It is a statement that is almost too massive to comprehend. The Buddha is telling us that the entire universe, with its 93 billion light-years of space, its 11 dimensions of M-theory, its infinite branching quantum timelines, and its 31 planes of existence, does not exist independently out there. It is a projection occurring entirely inside your own nervous system, right inside your own mind. Your world you experience only exists because your consciousness is here to observe and construct it. If you want to find the end of this terrifying, endless cycle of samsara, you do not need to build spaceships to fly across galaxies. You do not need to run for 100 years. You do not need to escape your physical body. You simply have to look inward and stop the projector. We started this journey looking through the high-definition lenses of the James Webb Space Telescope, staring at thousands of galaxies captured in a single grain of sand. We stretched our minds across the boiling, endless ocean of Alan Guth's bubble universes. We descended into the microscopic shifting shadows of the quantum double-slit experiment, realizing that physical matter refuses to crystallize until a conscious observer looks at it. We mapped the dimensions where parallel realities slide right past each other, vibrating at different frequencies, and we decoded the ancient suttas to find the exact same mathematical scale of galactic superclusters and cyclic eons of cosmic expansion and contraction preserved for 2,500 years. And finally, we looked at the biology of our own brains, seeing how the dissolution of our physical boundaries during deep meditation is not just a hallucination, but the removal of a biological filter. It leaves us with a staggering, beautiful paradox. On one hand, we are so incredibly, impossibly small. In the grand, terrifying architecture of this infinite multiverse, we are less than a whisper of dust. We are a fraction of a second in an eternal cycle of cosmic breath. And yet, at the exact same time, the human mind is the most powerful phenomenon in existence. Your consciousness is the only thing in the entire cosmos capable of holding all of this infinity inside itself. A black hole can swallow a star, a supercluster can contain 1 billion galaxies, but none of them can comprehend themselves. Only you can do that. And your mind is the only thing in the entire multiverse capable of doing no rocket, no quantum particle, and no giant star can ever do. Your mind can step completely out of the machine. It can transcend the cycle. It can reach nirvana. Now that we have reached the absolute edge of this journey and all the borders of time and space have dissolved, I want to ask you to do one small thing. I want you to look back at everything we have explored, from the quantum particles to the infinite galaxies and the deep silence of the mind. If you had to choose just one single key word that summarizes what this entire journey means to you, what word would that be? For me, the word is liberation, but I am deeply curious to see the diverse words that will appear in the space below. The physical stars will continue to burn, the cosmic bubbles will continue to expand in the dark, and the wheel of time will keep turning. But the path out of the maze is already open, and it begins right where you are. May you all progress in the Dhamma. We look forward to seeing you